welcome to ASSAf's first inaugural STEMI lecture. Our program director for today is Professor Janice Slimson, who is from Rhodes University, as well as the chairperson of the ASSAf STEMI Standing Committee and a member of the ASSAf Council. Prof. Slimson, the platform is now yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And for me, a very warm welcome to the inaugural Academy of Science for South Africa annual STEMI lecture. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Professor Catherine Ngila, and also all the ASSAf members, council and staff, and to all of you for joining in this afternoon. So my role here is to facilitate this afternoon, and there are a couple of housekeeping rules I've been made aware of. Firstly, there'll be an opportunity for questions after the presentation. Kindly post those in the Q&A section below. Please do not use the chat function. Please remember to also keep your microphones and videos off when not required. I'd now like to hand over to the President of the Academy of Science of South Africa, Professor Thokozani Majozi, who is also the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at the University of the Witwatersrand. Professor Majozi. Professor Majozi, you are muted at the moment.
Thank you very much, Prof. Limson, for the introduction. To the Executive Officer of ASSAf, Prof. Himla Sudyal, who is with us here this afternoon. Our distinguished speaker today, Prof. Catherine Ngila, our Program Director and member of ASSAf Council, Prof. Jason Limson. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, fellow scientists, and champions of positive change, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome you to the first ASSAf annual STEMI lecture for 2025. We gather here not merely as audience, but as collective architects of Africa's scientific future. A future that demands our unwavering commitments to excellence, equity, and transformative potential. Our distinguished speaker today, Prof. Ngila, represents the extraordinary caliber of African women in science, a beacon of inspiration and a testament to the remarkable potential that exists within our continent. Her lecture, which is titled Women in STEMI, Achievements and Challenges, the African Perspective, arrives at a critical moment in our collective scientific journey. The abstracts Professor Ngila will explore today touch the very heart of a crucial global change, the persistent gender disparity in scientific fields. This is not merely a statistical concern, but a fundamental impediment to our collective progress. When we exclude or marginalize women from science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and innovation, we are not just losing individual talent, we are diminishing our collective capacity for breakthrough and innovation. History is littered with evidence of the roles women have played in shaping the life that we live today and changing the future forever. I always say go to the periodic table and look at how many women have played a role in coming up with some of the elements that you will see in the periodic table. They still remain largely unsung heroes. As the Academy of Science of South Africa, we recognize that true scientific advancement cannot be achieved without inclusive representation. The United Nations Agenda 2030 and the African Union Agenda 2063 are not abstract aspirations, but concrete roadmaps that demand our active participation. They call us to dismantle systemic barriers, challenge entrenched biases, and create environments where every talented individual, regardless of gender, can contribute to scientific discovery. Professor Ngila's work through the African Foundation for Women and Youth in Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation exemplifies the strategic approach that is needed. By focusing on education, opportunity creation, and supportive ecosystems, we can unlock the immense potential of African women in STEMI fields. Today's lecture is more than an academic presentation. To recognize, support, and amplify the voices and contributions of women scientists across our continent, and of course, across the globe. It is an invitation to reimagine our scientific landscape, welcomed, but celebrated as a fundamental driver of innovation. So then with those words, I invite you to listen, reflect, and most importantly, commit to action. Let us transform this lecture from a moment of insight, catalyst for meaningful change. I will now hand over back to the program director, Prof. Janice Limson, and welcome to the lecture, everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Majorzi, for laying the foundation for the presentations going forward. Thank you. I would now like to welcome Dr. Malusi Twala. He is the manager of the Science Advisory and Strategic Partnerships of the Academy of Science of South Africa. Dr. Malusi Twala, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Limson, Chair. To the Chair of the ASSAf Council, Professor Majosi, and other Council members in attendance, the Executive Officer of the Academy of Science of South Africa, greetings to you all. It is really honor and privilege and pride for me to introduce today's keynote speaker. It is with pride because Professor Catherine Ngila is an ASSAf member. But it is with honor because this distinguished scholar is a well-renowned analytical environmental chemist whose work has informed and contributed immensely to the status of water quality policy and monitoring up to date. This is an exercise that she continues to undertake using her discipline to advance socioeconomic development. From a leadership perspective, Professor Ngila has served various leadership roles in academia, and the latest one having been professor and head of applied chemistry department at the University of Johannesburg. After that, she moved on to the Academy, African Academy of Sciences, where she served as the previous executive director. However, she continues to play a role in various scientific bodies, mainly the World Academy of Sciences, AAS, the African Academy of Sciences, as well as my own ASSAf as well. In addition to that, Professor Ngila has played an instrumental role in mentoring the next generation of scientists, as well as advancing the conversation of science across the world. She has supervised over 130 postgraduate students in her field of work, and she has got a basket full of publications also in this regard. But her passion, which she advances today, is the advancement of inclusive participation in the science, technology, and innovation ecosystem, whereby she spends most of her time providing mentorship to women and youth in education and science, technology, and innovation within the continent and overseas. With that, I would like to end there and hand back over to you. We look forward to the lecture, Professor Ngila. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Twala, for those comments. Professor Ngila, you're welcome to start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Director of Ceremonies. I will now open my presentation. Okay, so we are there now. I would like to thank ASSAf in terms of governance as well as the management, and obviously the series, the ASSAf annual STEMI series. I'm quite happy that 2025 I started this series. So such a big honor for me, being also ASSAf member. So I've been introduced, and basically these are my contacts. These are my contacts. Currently, the executive director of the African Foundation for Women and Youth has indicated, and also very important, a visiting professor at University of Johannesburg, a university that I hold very dearly. Despite that, I'm no longer there, but I still continue participating in activities. And that explains why you see the slides also have got UJ logo. So this is such an honor for me. In my presentation today, I would like to look at some of the aspects such as, first I'll start with the introduction to the foundation, whatever it is that we do, because what we do is actually very much in tandem with what we are talking about today. And then I will also look at 1995, we had Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The question is, and of course, 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them, but fifth SDG is about gender equality. And now we are talking about the gender equality in science. Today we are talking about science. And then I will also just briefly, and even as our president of ASSAf has indicated, that we all whatever we do, our frameworks, national frameworks, continental frameworks, we are talking to United Nations because we are all members of United Nations, most of the countries. And so therefore the agenda for 2030 of UN is talking to all the countries, including South Africa, Kenya, even where I am, and generally Africa as a continent. And so looking at the agenda for African Union, 2063 is also important, and most important also to look at science, technology, innovation strategy for Africa, which I think 2024 just ended, and they are trying to finalize it. They have not yet launched the 2034 agenda, a strategy for Africa in science, technology, and innovation. And then maybe just have a look at, briefly, look at the status of research in Africa, what's going on, because we know research, STEMI, all these fields, they talk to our economies. Our economic development, sustainable development, it's all hinged on our STEM subjects, our sciences, whether natural sciences, social sciences, we are all talking to STEMI. I mean, we are all talking to economic development. And then also look at some of the highlights of the growth, economic growth that is pegged to STEMI, but then also get now into the agenda, which is today's presentation, which is about gender gaps in Africa, globally in Africa, and particularly in STEM. And I would like to, towards the end, highlight some of the strategies that South Africa has put in place, and we will see the results of that, some of the data will show, is to show that South Africa is really, hub on the map, particularly in Africa, in terms of leading in research, and also even women, percentage of women that are involved in STEM and research. And I would like to, before I end, I also am a member of the UNESCO Call for Action Closing the Gender Gap advisory, panel of advisory experts. And I would like also to highlight some of the recommendations that UNESCO has given in terms of action to close the gender gap. And I would like to acknowledge. Now, in terms of the African Academy of Sciences, I left UJ, University of Johannesburg, in 2017. And when I came back to Kenya, I worked in a few places as a professor, Dr. Twala has indicated. But then towards the end, towards my retirement, I decided to give back to the community, not just the Kenyan community, South Africa community, and Africa in general. So I started a foundation for women and youth, and we only we are more focused on mentorship, just trying to expose young people, young girls, in STEM subjects. And we do that, we join hands with some of the local organizations like Kenya Chemical Society, Kenya National, that is NATCOM, okay? Kenya National Commission for UNESCO. And so we partner, and we go around talking to girls, trying to give mentorship and all that. And so the vision of the foundation is to transform lives of women and youth through mentorship in education, science, technology, and innovation. Some of the activities that we get involved in to do with the mentorship of young and women and youth, capacity building by providing opportunities whenever we come across. Before I started this foundation, I was not very good in social media. Hardly you would find me there. But after that, I realized if I'm talking to the youth, then obviously social media is where you find the youth. And so I'm very, very active in social media, particularly in LinkedIn, because that is where we have got a lot of professional activities. And then I've got a whole range of youth across Africa, both men and women, who follow me. And whenever I've got opportunities, and I share with them on the platform. I do support different recognition schemes, particularly I work very closely with L'Oreal Foundation, and of course there is L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science, and I do support that a lot. Role modeling of youth, and particularly in, those who are excelling in whatever areas, I like to be there so that I can support them and cheer them on. And so those are the activities, and of course, partnerships. I talked about the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO, that we partner very closely as an organization that supports one of the pillars and objectives of UNESCO, which is education and science. They are very, very active on the ground in Kenya, and we go to different schools in different parts of Kenya, particularly in girls' schools, because of the fact that still we have got, when we look at the percentage of women in science, which is about 30%, we're still lacking behind. And of course, the goal is to get either 50 or above percent. And so we've got a group of women, professional women, that who belong to different professions. We have got marine scientists, got architects, we have got engineers, chemists like myself. And we just go to give stories to schools and say, well, how did I become a chemist, for example? How did somebody become a marine? What does it mean to be a marine scientist, particularly from a practical perspective? And that really sort of transforms the thinking of girls and exposes them to different opportunities and careers in STEM. So we're talking about the STEMI, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and innovation. And I like the word innovation towards the end, because for a long time we have been promoting STEM education and all that. But we realize now that innovation even starts very early. And so therefore, and of course, it is very much in line with the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa, to recognize that innovation can start at very early stages, where we either look at things like intellectual property and whatever aspects we can be able to change, and maybe later it becomes economically viable. So by 2030, from literature, we told that young Africans will be making about 42% of the world's youth, and that is big, coming from one continent. And 75 of those numbers will be under 35. So what that tells us is that it's also important for us to invest a lot in STEM education, and not just STEM, but quality STEM education. And we are going to see some of the aspects about STEM education. Because this is so important for our social progression, economic growth, and is also recognized by the United Nations 2030 agenda, which has got 17 goals, a plan, which the agenda is a plan for action for people, planet, and prosperity, to strengthen, generally the global landscape in terms of eradicating poverty in all forms and dimensions. Under the United Nations, we also have United Nations science, technology, innovation for SDGs, for Sustainable Development Goals. I do participate in a group called high-level 10-member group, and we support the high-level political forum in terms of looking at policies, looking at how far have we gone, measuring case studies, and also looking at progress that member countries of United Nations have made in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through a mechanism known as a technology facilitation mechanism. We support the United Nations interagency task team on science, technology, and innovation. And this is all geared towards achieving the Agenda 2030 through the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Talking about STEM education, I like to share these. These are just the things that I downloaded, and I looked at on the left-hand side. You see these kids, they are in a lab, and the teacher is just drawing diagrams as to what, how, say, for example, in an experiment, they have never done an experiment, but they are just copying from literature and from notes, whatever the teacher tells them. So these children are not exposed to hands-on experience in STEM education. They would copy notes, and those who are lucky will be able to visualize how experiments can be done in physics, in chemistry, and biology. But look on the right-hand side. You see a very well structured laboratory equipped with equipment, facilities. A child who is going to go through education through these labs will be far much exposed, and also at a higher advantage in terms of visualizing and coming up with innovation. But despite all these challenges that we have faced in Africa, we still get very, very smart children, youth that come out of it and come up with innovation. And so we must be very proud that despite the challenges in infrastructure, we still get very high quality academics and high quality graduates that are coming from in STEM education that come from Africa. I talked about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and just basically the agenda which started was 2015 for 15 years up to 2030, and now we are left with probably about 5 years to go. In a nutshell, the 2030 agenda is to end poverty and other deprivations, improve health and education, reduce inequalities, spur economic growth, tackle climate change, preserve oceans and forests, and many others. But we'll also see that later when we see the 2063 agenda for African Union, it mirrors very much closely, because I mean, all the regions of the world, as long as we are members of UN, we extract whatever it is relevant for our continent, our space, our countries, and we implement that towards one goal, which is achieving that poverty eradication for all humanity. And so therefore, the UN supports science, technology, and innovation through its member countries, and it has got different mechanisms, like I talked about the technology facilitation mechanism, STI roadmaps that come under the African Union. We have got roadmaps that that usually are driven by the AUDA-NEPAD, that is African Union Development Agency, New Partnership for Development, UN Technology Bank, and many others. And of course, we know I've talked about the how the UN Sustainable Development Goals came about, 2015 up to 2030, and the different levels of mechanisms that they use to make sure that they can monitor in the member countries what is happening in terms of are we still going to be attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, there in the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to see some of the goals, like, for example, goal number 5 and 10. It's all about closing the inequality or removing the inequalities. The group that I participate in the United Nations is called the 10-member, it's called the 10-member UN high-level representatives, and we are drawn from different countries. And our work is to support the high-level political forum. Usually we meet in May in New York, and then the high-level political forum meets in July after we have set the scene. Last year, we looked at poverty eradication as the selected SDGs. Poverty eradication, which is goal number 1, number 2, hunger elimination, climate action, 16 is peace and good governance, and 17 was partnership. This year is going to be a different set of goals that we'll be looking at. Last year, then I did a presentation looking at the African continent, particularly looked closely at a report prepared by Auda NEPAD and in line with SDGs that we were focusing on last year, to see how far we have gone in Africa and some of the case studies that Africa can be able to showcase in terms of attainment of the sustainable development, including the gender equality. Now, I've indicated that. So last year, that is what we did. We did SDG 1, 2, and then we did 13, 16, and 17, as you see in blue. In yellow is what we are doing this year in May, again in New York. We are doing the goal number 3, good health and well-being, gender equality. Gender equality is there. Goal number 5 is we are focusing on that. Recently, in January, we met again the United Nations Women, also to review how far we have gone in terms of the 30 years after the Beijing 1995 declaration. We'll also be looking at decent work and economic growth. And in fact, you'll be surprised to see the economic growth and decent work is also talking to women. Are we recognizing the work the women do that is not documented, or should I say highlighted as a formal job? Women do a lot of informal work that support the economy, but these are not documented. And they are therefore, UN is very keen to see and document all stories that women are participating in. We are also looking at goal number 14, which is life below water, that we are looking at marine science and basically what is happening in that space in terms of the water economy or marine economy or blue economy, so to speak. And goal number 17, which is basically looking at science, technology, innovation, capacity building, trading, and finance. I talked about the African Union, also the support of STEMI by African Union, and looking at basically science, technology, innovation strategy for Africa, 2024, which has ended now, and we should be now starting our 2034. That is from 2025 to 2034, 10 years. Basically, in a nutshell, the STISA strategy is focused on 4 mutually reinforcing pillars, namely the building and upgrading of research infrastructures. We do recognize that in Africa we are lacking behind, and we are going to see some of the data in terms of what is the status of research in Africa. Enhancing professional and technological competencies, promoting entrepreneurship and innovation, and providing an enabling environment for STI development in Africa. And so therefore, in 2034, that is the Agenda 2034, we are going to see. When a review was done, STI 2024 Agenda review was done, it recorded quite progressive, I must say, a big increase of research and publications in Africa that are coming from Africa. Looking at an increase of about 135% from the 2014 to 2024 period that they were looking at. That was reviewed in 2022. Improved productivity has also been noticed from Africa, again, in terms of science, technology, and innovation. The priority areas for 2024 were eradicating hunger, preventing and controlling disease communication, protecting space, and building society and wealth creation. Now, 2034, looking at what we'll be looking at 2034 is agriculture. The focus will be on agriculture, in health, ICT. ICT because of the digital platforms and digitalization, energy and environment are coming. And the framework, you know, as they were reviewing, I've looked at the review of the STISA 2024 and some of the key gaps that you know, have been identified in terms of actualization and achieving the Agenda 2063, and of course, STISA 2024, they noticed that they identified inadequate coordination of STI initiatives and breakthroughs, access to finance. All these issues are, as much as they look global and continental, they do affect women, obviously. access to finance, weak intellectual property rights, digital inequalities, particularly digital inequality has been highlighted as one of the challenges that women, because of lack of access to digital tools and digital platforms, for whatever reason, either because of poverty or low pay and data inefficiency. We don't collect data. We don't keep data properly in Africa, and this is one of the problems, even has been highlighted by UNESCO, that whenever they want data from Africa to know how far we have gone, that becomes a challenge, and therefore that is something that as African institutions, we really have to be very, very serious about data, keeping data so that it can inform, can make decision. So coming to the UN resolution on gender equality, I would like to look at the Beijing Declaration and then platform since 1995, as well as the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is gender equality. And in this particular case, I want to specify gender equality in STEM. There are 12 areas of concern that were identified in 1995, were women and poverty, education and training of women, health, and you can see all these issues are also coming in Agenda 2063 for Africa, 2030 for United Nations, power and decision making, institutional mechanism for advancement of women, human rights, women and media, promoting women and media, environment, the girl child, violence against women, armed conflict, women and armed conflict, and also women and economy. Now, some of the targets, and this is now the 2015, the UN agenda, when it started, the 9 targets they identified, and you can see they mirror very closely with the Beijing platform, declaration and platform for action. That is ending discrimination against women and the girl child, ending all forms of violence against women, eliminating forced marriage and genital mutilation, value and paid care. And this is goal number 8, which is talking about work, decent work. So value unpaid care and promote shared domestic responsibilities, because that is work in definition. Ensure women full participation in leadership and decision making, because unless they are participating in decision making and policy, then obviously some of the things that are important will be left out. Universal access to reproductive health and rights, promoting empowerment of women through technology, and these are examples. And the UN came up with about 6 days that they celebrate that all either talk to women or girls, women and girls basically. 11th of February, talk about International Day of Women and Girls in Science. 8th of March, we talk about International Women's Day, which we celebrated recently. 22nd of April, which is coming, Girls in ICT. October 11th, it's International Day of the Girl Child. 15th of October, October is a special month that's got 2 days to celebrate. International Day of Rural Women, and 25th of November is International Day of Elimination of Gender-Based Violence. Now, some of the challenges that we are faced with, and it's not just only Africa, but because the context today is Africa, even globally, but of course Africa, we as a continent that is striving to catch up with the rest of the world, and therefore, some of the issues that are discussed here, very much talk to Africa. That is underrepresentation. Women are significantly underrepresented in STEM fields. But I show some data that contradicts that statement, because as data is collected, and as we collect data, we see things are changing, and which is good if it is changing in the positive direction. Societal and cultural norms, traditional gender roles, a lack of role models. Mentorship is also important, and that's how our foundation is very, very keen on mentorship, because we realize that if you mentor a girl and you give her exposure, she will go far. And South Africa is very good at that. I mean, we, NRI programs, DSI programs that are promoting female scientist. Systematic barriers, discrimination, bias, lack of support in educational institutions, limited access to education. I think not long ago, if you have got two children, a boy and a girl, and you have got limited resource, which one would you prefer to take to school in the African context? Of course, the boy. Why? Because the boy is a person who is going to propagate the inheritance of that particular family, and therefore the boy, we focus more on the boy, and that is the mindset in Africa. But of course, this mindset is changing, right? Early marriage and childbearing is also another disadvantage for women and girls. Digital divide is also another challenge that we have, and we generally it's indicated that access to digital tools, digital facilities, platform to women is far much less than boys. So how do we solve these problems? Some of the suggestions, promoting STEM education for girls, and we do that, and I'm sure many programs are continuing to do that. We continue supporting the girl child so that they can embrace and overcome the stereotypes that science, STEM subjects are for men and girls are for social sciences and humanities. So that mindset really needs to be removed, because we know it has been established and it has been demonstrated that the girl is just as well smart as a boy in terms of achieving this. Providing mentorship, and I think this is coming throughout investing in research and development, of course, for everybody. But obviously, as you do that, you have to have a gender lens to know what some of the specific challenges that girls and women go through. And therefore, you can be able to assist that. In fact, talking about research and development in some of the funding organization, when I was working for the African Academy of Sciences, and we would get a program, and in such a program, we can be able to allow, and if you say that you must have finished your PhD 10 years ago, for women, we say, well, if there's evidence that they have had children and in the process they were delayed, we can be able to allow them to, maybe you will have finished about 12 years or 15 years. That way you allow women, because of the special conditions and situations they find themselves in. Policies, very important. Again, digital divide is coming there, and generally empowering the African women through education and economic opportunities. Some of the stats that I've been able to get from the literature that shows that women are raising their voices to be heard, and we have got so many platforms and fora that we continue talking about women and all that. So the more we drum this, the message, the better it gets, and so therefore we don't get tired of doing that. Africa has got the youngest population, as indicated previously, somewhere else, and therefore we continue to do that. And of course, the young population includes young girls. According to the World Economic Forum, a report that showed the future jobs report was given in 2023. It shows that in Africa, we still need, we have got about 23 million STEM graduates that are required by 2030, so that we can be able to meet engineering, health, and IT sectors globally. Only that 3.3% of researchers are women, or rather women are constituted at 3.3% globally, that is. But when we look at Africa, the numbers are very close, about that 3.3% women represented in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. There was a report that was compiled by Times Higher Education and also UNESCO that showed that 47% of the women in universities who are graduating, so students that are graduating either from undergraduates or postgraduate, 47% of them are women. And I was happy to see that number, because you see, the number that sticks in my head is 30%. So when I see 47% of graduates are women, then I see, we are getting closer to the 50-50 ratios. I think other statistics are showing, apart from the 47 graduates in STEM subjects, 33% R&D scientists who are women in sub-Saharan Africa. This number 24 is far much less women who use internet. And again, that is why you see that the 2034 STI, that is TISA STI strategy for Africa, 2034 is emphasizing the need and highlighting the internet and the artificial intelligence to be emphasized, because they can see the numbers. We still have very low percentages. And we see that jobs that are aligned with ICT in 2023, there was 154 billion that was produced as a result of mobile technologies, or rather engagement with mobile technologies. 40% informal workers in sub-Saharan Africa involved in e-commerce. Anything that has got electronic requires that we need to invest more in digital platforms. Now, I started this statement here on the title that says Africa has the highest proportion of female STEM graduates, and I put a question mark. It is a study that I've looked at some report from Times, and I was quite impressed to see this. I would want to look again other studies to see whether they collaborate with this study that was produced by Times Higher Education, showing that 47% of graduates are coming from, and undergraduates are actually women, which is quite a good number, and we are going the right direction. Another report by a World Bank, there's a report in the southern region, and the South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and Eswatini, that showed that the African universities have got the highest percentage of women in science graduates in the world. So this is very very encouraging and very exciting news, showing that African universities, that particularly in those countries that have been studied, show the highest percentage of women in science and women in science graduates in the world. This is something to celebrate, but I said this is something that we have to look through to make sure that we don't celebrate too early, but it's quite impressive so far. That 6% of senior academics globally are women, but only 29% are publishing papers, so the question then is, what is the problem, particularly in Africa? Africa is home to inspiring group of women that are pursuing different careers. These are success stories such as aircraft pilot, physicians, electrical. So as we start seeing numbers coming through, that is quite exciting. Engineering fields have got challenge, and we see less than 30%, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. Continuing on the success stories and also some of the challenges that we come across, leveraging digital platforms for gender equality. A study that was done again by United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, studied in 5 countries, Mauritius, Nigeria, Seychelles, Tunisia, and South Africa, were indicated as the most advanced countries in Africa that have advanced in digitalization. And so therefore, but now has been noted that the cost of owning and using a mobile phone is one of the most important barriers that women are faced with. African Gender Index relating to STEM education shows that only 37%, 37.9, about 38%, for about 20 countries where these studies were done, indicating a significant imbalance in favor of men. Women represent 29% of workforce in ICT. So ICT is an area, and engineering is an area to look at. This is the data that was collected, published by UNESCO, a study that was done in 2018, and published in 2019. In the about 20 countries in Africa. So I just want to highlight countries of interest for us here today. Number 6, that is South Africa. With our population, remember this one was 2019, so the population in South Africa probably has gone up, 58 million. But most important is to see the percentage of women science researchers. You see, South Africa is leading in the 20 countries that have been studied, 45% with 45% of women in research. South Africa competes very favorably with Egypt, showing 44%. And Sudan, surprise, surprise, Sudan is registering 40%. I'm shy to say that in Kenya, we only have about 26%, so we need to pull our socks in that particular area. But the question then is, why do we have these challenges? And that's why I wanted to show this slide, showing you in terms of the output of research in Africa, that Africa spends, and these are the reasons, Africa spends an average of about 0.45% of its GDP on research and development. So the target for African Union is 1%. Globally, it's about 1.7%. So that means that we in Africa, we've got a long way to go. And of course, that explains why our research output is low, is because we are also not investing much in research. Africa has got as less than 100 researchers per million people. This is about 10 times less than the global average, which shows about 1,100 researchers per million people. So we've got a bit of work to do. And some of the reasons under investment, obviously it goes without saying, infrastructure, research infrastructure and all that. We are not investing enough. We are not supporting cutting edge in basic research. And we need to do that. We need to empower African researchers, including women, because if women are 50% of the global population, obviously without investing in women, then we will never get there. So that is something that we have to be watching. So what is required for us to be able to achieve that level? So we need a world-class research innovation facilities, financial management in terms of research directorates, individual, professional development, networks and exposure, inter-Africa, intra-Africa collaboration, as well as inter-Africa and, Africa and other global South, global North partnerships, leadership in development, institutional strengthening in grants management, strong community public engagement, and also looking at innovation and entrepreneurship. As I go towards the end, I would like to look at some of the case studies that we have in Africa, in South Africa. Some of the programs that are really encouraging and advocating, supporting women in science. Recognition awards, I think in South Africa, we have to be very proud that we are doing very well in that particular area. Because it's so important to recognize people when they're doing well, and more so particularly women, because always feel very, very low, and therefore once you have lifted and somebody says, oh no, you're doing very well, that kind of boosts your morale, and it promotes a feeling of pride, and you can go far with that. So South Africa has got the Women in Science Awards, SAWISA. Before we used to call it WISA, because I participated in one in 2016. And WISA serves the following purposes: it recognizes and rewards excellence by women scientists and researchers, profile these women as role models for young people. So they become role models for young people, encourage rewarding young women, highlighting, because the programs, they come in two categories. There is the young, distinguished young researchers and established young, distinguished women. So therefore, in both cases, we are promoting and encouraging women, both established as well as young. And when you look at the areas, and we also have the master's and PhD programs that are encouraging, girls and particularly to do well in their respective areas in natural sciences, engineering, human and social sciences, indigenous knowledge, and astronomy. Criteria particularly for these awards is research outputs, research impact, professional research experience, human capital development, contribution to women and girls empowerment, and also science engagement and collaboration. Like I said, I participated in the WISA, that is Women in Science in South Africa, in 2016 in the physical and engineering category. South Africa has got another program, which is the L'Oreal UNESCO. See, L'Oreal, when they started these L'Oreal UNESCO Awards, basically it's the L'Oreal Foundation, but very much supported by UNESCO in terms of publicity and all that for women in science. It was launched in 1998, and then they started the young talents in sub-Saharan Africa in 2000. From 2000, for sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa was hosting, if you do recall, for those who recall, it used to be in Sandton most of the time. I attended quite a number of them. Some of my students also managed to get the Young Talents Awards. But in 2018, South Africa decided to strengthen this program, and in fact, started a national program. So 2018, South Africa started this national program, but then it broke from the sub-Saharan Africa, bigger, the regional awards. So we have got 2 awards that are running in Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa national awards. So 2018, when South Africa was hosting the national awards for L'Oreal UNESCO, it moved now to Kenya. Kenya was the first country to host sub-Saharan Africa after South Africa had now started their national program. But this is very good news because of the fact that it is because of this good news that you see a lot of progress has been made, in terms of promoting women in science. We also have L'Oreal UNESCO International Women in Science, which gives about 5 awards globally, and Africa is of course recognized, but Africa usually are put together in the same category with the Arab states. But what the L'Oreal UNESCO they do is that they rotate. If it is in Arab state in this year, the next year it is going to be in Africa, and so forth and so on. So that is good because then it gives an opportunity for African states also to get. So we have got Africa and Arab states, we've got Asia and Pacific, we've got Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and the North America. All these programs, they go into promoting and boosting the morale, and also acting as role models, particularly those who manage to get these awards. For the young talents, they get about 15 PhDs currently, 15 PhDs and 5 postdoctoral they get. For the global awards, it's 5 women, 1 from each one of the regions that I've indicated. And so far, L'Oreal UNESCO program has awarded 140 countries, and a total of 4,400 women researchers have been awarded. In South Africa, to single out, one of the first women to get the L'Oreal UNESCO International Awards was Professor Roshia Abdul Karim from UKZN in 2008, and it was followed by Professor Tebelo Nyokong in 2009. And I came in 2021. I don't want to tell you who it is getting 2025, but it's from South Africa. I was looking at the internet to see whether L'Oreal UNESCO has announced who is on publicly, because I sit in the jury, so I know who is getting in South Africa this year. So we are waiting to celebrate that. And so that was the 2021 when I joined, or rather was awarded there, and that was at the UNESCO headquarters getting these awards. I was quite excited to see, as I was getting out of the UNESCO headquarters, I see a post and I looked closely. I say, oh, this is me. So of course you smile and say, wow, this is nice. And in terms of research in water and nanotechnology. Then 2023 last year and this year, 2023 and 2024, both times I went to Paris to celebrate other women getting these awards. And when I'm coming at the airport, I see my poster there. I was quite impressed, and I was like, okay, take me a photo next to this poster. They usually do that, L'Oreal, UNESCO, they do that, particularly when the awards are taking place. They put them on posters in the big international airports, just so that they can be able to promote, which is quite good in that kind of promotion. 2017, I was recognized. I was at the University of Johannesburg, but when they looked at my passport, they say, no, you're East Africa. So I was put in the East Africa category. And somebody from University of Pretoria, that is Professor Celia Abonik, got from the Southern region, the 5 women from the 5 regions in Africa. Now, towards the end, I want now to briefly look at some of the recommendations as per the UNESCO. Dismantling, they have got 3 key areas: dismantling gender stereotypes and biases in science. Another strategy they have is pathways for girls in science, innovation, and educational strategies, and opening educational options, and then safe work environment for women in science. In terms of dismantling the gender stereotypes, some of the things that they have UNESCO has advocated is to have include more discoveries and stories about women, putting images of women in books, textbooks, so that girls in schools can see, there's a woman here. It's not just not men who do science. Increasing the presence of female scientists in the media, newspapers, magazine, and I always say that South Africa is leading in Africa in terms of promoting, female scientists. Organize and provide related funding. And again, funding is also important for research, for you to be able to achieve your research, and also in terms of the STEM areas. Equitable representation of women and men in committees, as plenary speakers, because that way, the more we see the image of women, we say, it's the nature of both women and both men and women, they can equally do it. So these are things that we can be able to promote and dismantle the stereotypes. Another strategy that, or should I say pillar, that UNESCO is interested in is the pathways for girls. When we go to schools together with the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO, we go to schools and we talk about careers. And I'm sure that even when I was in South Africa, we used to go to schools and talk about careers. During the National Week, Science Week, students, they come to university, they go to different places, and there's exhibition, and students are exposed to all these things. So introduction of curriculum, science curriculum at an early stage is so important. Removing the gender bias and stereotypes from teaching and learning materials, not just always photos of men. We need to have books showing also women and also participating, scholarships, engaging parents and primary caregivers, so that they can be able to advance and also promote. Prioritizing interactive, interdisciplinary, equal learning environments is so important. Allocating resources for extracurriculum STEM programs, clubs, after-school activities, investing specialized teacher training to equip them with skills that are gender responsive, provide gender transformative counseling, encourage business to implement corporate social responsibility that support women and girls. The last item, which is again towards the end, is the safe working environment for women in STEM subjects, in STEM fields. I like to give this example. When I worked for one of the companies in Kenya, and it was an engineering company. One lady was an electrical engineer, and she left the electrical engineering department to move to environment. And when I asked her, she said, I was the only woman in the whole of engineering in terms of mechanical, electrical, and all that. So I felt very intimidated by men. And that's where I moved to where there were more women. And so to encourage more women to pursue STEM subjects, we need to be able to encourage advocacy, so important in scientific workplace. Again, towards finishing off, strategies for effective advocacy, some of the things I've already indicated, like mentorship, workplace advocates to amplify the voices of female colleagues, challenging workplace biases, providing network opportunities, and promoting flexibility for work-life balance is also important for particularly young women who have got a family, young family. I would like to, at this point in time, again, once more, to say thank you, a big thank you to ASSAf for inviting me this, in particular, our president, Professor Majosi, our executive officer, Professor Himla. Janice, it was nice to see you again after a long time, our chairperson for ASSAf STEM Standing Committee. Dr. Melusi Twala, we started this journey with you last year when I came for the Science Forum in South Africa, in Pretoria, and we started discussing how I can participate in this. So thank you very much. And then later, I met with Raj, and we arranged how we are going to do this. So thank you so much, Henriette, and the whole team for this, and for everybody who is attending. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ngila, for this really thought-provoking presentation, and it's wonderful to see you again as well.
Thank you.
I would like to now introduce, thank you. I'd like to introduce Professor Pat Naidu. He is the co-chair of the ASSAf STEMI Standing Committee, and he's also a professor in the Faculty of Engineering in the Built Environment at the University of Johannesburg. He will oversee the Q&A session. Over to you, Professor Naidu.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Professor Catherine. An excellent presentation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, in terms of the challenges going forward, we always talk about access to resources, in particular finance, a big struggle. And again, we've got a question here from Mohammed Hussain, and again, it's reflecting the present-day developments. We've heard about US aid and the American agenda to make America great again. And that source of assistance is now going to stop. And again, we know that our public sector is continuously challenged with many, many demands. How would you guide us going forward, ma'am, given these recent developments? How can we continue to fill this gap that has been created? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Prof, for that. And also to highlight the fact that what is happening, I think in Africa, we have become very lazy. We've become very lazy because USAID is around the corner, is going to give us money for health, particularly in health. Now we're seeing that TB and HIV programs are really impacted, not just in Kenya, in South Africa, in Nigeria, everywhere in Africa. People are really making noise, and how are we going to survive without this program? But the question is, you've got a country, you've got your government. What is your government doing about this? I was laughing recently when the former president of Kenya was giving a talk somewhere, and then he said that, why are you people crying that Trump has cut these programs? You must be ashamed of yourself. You've got a country. We don't pay tax to America. So why would America invest in us? I mean, it was a way of trying to sort of challenge the current government to simply say that come up with a mechanism to cushion some of these programs that have been disconnected, so that as a country, we should be able to support these programs. Look at the budget and see where you can be able to sort of cut down the budget, cut down corruption, so that the money that goes into corruption can go into this program, and stop crying about whether programs have been removed. So let me put it this way. I think from time immemorial, we have always gained from international funders. When I was in the African Academy of Sciences, obviously we were getting money from different organizations that were funding our research in Africa. So if these research are disconnected, so what happens to these researchers that have been gaining from all this international funding, including the local funding, I mean the continental funding? And the answer is that every single country needs to look at their national development plans, look at their budget, and see where they can be able to allocate, so that we can be able to. We saw from the status of research that Africa is about 0.45. Maybe now it has improved to about 0.5% compared to the target, the African Union target, which is 1%, and globally 1.7. So we really let me put it this way, maybe when we are punished and we still want to do research, then we are going to scratch our heads and say, okay, now we have no choice but to come up with a budget for supporting this program. So you can see I'm quite, passionate about and disappointed with our African governments, why they are not really putting their money where their mouth is.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. No, support those thoughts. Ma'am, if I may just expand and generalize, I think the way forward is going to be greater investment in self-sufficiency. And I think we are now all going to have to bring all hands on deck so that we could enhance national productivity. And you said it earlier, the innovation part of STEMI has got to come to the forefront. Your thoughts on innovation and creativity as we start to embrace this idea of being more self-sufficient?
In terms of, when you look at, and I think this is also a mistake that we all make as professors, and when we are training our students in universities, we are like, okay, we need to publish as many papers as possible. But you see some of the publications that we are publishing, if you look at very keenly, you see there are some elements of innovation and elements of patent that you can be able, intellectual property, where you can be able to patent, because obviously that is now going to propel you next to the prototypes and commercialization and all that. But when we are only focused on mass production of papers, and I'm guilty of the same accusation. If we focus too much on publication and ignore the innovation, then we are going to lag behind big time. I think if we put, and maybe also this can be reinforced by our governments and say that, okay, with a paper that is a patent that is going to give us an innovation and it is going to give us a prototype, we are going to allocate more in terms of the funding that we receive for every paper we publish. And so if we allocate more money on innovations, then maybe we are going to see, people will turn around and say, I don't have to publish 100 papers. I can publish 20 papers, but those papers are impactful. And the rest of the data that I have, I want to channel it to innovation. So I think it is a question of mindset. And I think once we start thinking about it at national level and then institutional level, we'll start changing the mindset, because we've got a lot of opportunities of patenting and commercialization that we kind of leave them somewhere hanging, and we are not focused on that because our goal is something else. And now if we change the mindset, we are also going to see that we can be able maybe to achieve much on that one. There's something else that on the first question where you said, what can we do now that international funding seems to be now getting less? I think we also have to look at South-South collaboration. South-South collaboration, can we collaborate within the continent? Whereby can we have centers of excellence, for example, in the southern region, in the Eastern Africa community, in the Western Africa? Let's have centers of excellence so that those universities and institutions that do not have access, they can be able to rely on these centers of excellence so that they have access to the to funding as well as to infrastructure for research. Thank you.
No, excellent leadership. Excellent leadership. Thank you. Prof, in terms of workplace, as we encourage the diversification of the workforce, is the workplace inclusive and supportive of women? In your experience, where are the shortcomings and how can we improve that?
So I like to giving examples of situations, and I think I gave you one example whereby a lady was an electrical engineer, and in a company where I worked, an electrical engineer, and every time they were going to the field, the men will just tell her, carry all this equipment just to see how she's struggling. And because it's electrical, they are going to be fixing things on the roofs, and they will say, now you are the person today who is going to climb. And as she tries to climb, they start laughing. So obviously she felt so discouraged, and eventually she said, no, I cannot stay in electrical engineering with this intimidation and harassment. So she moved. Now, if we had a supportive culture whereby we support women who are in STEM fields, who are doing engineering and all that, then we used to start seeing, and now numbers are increasing. I'm sure that happened in about almost, more than 5 years ago. Today, it is a different ballgame. I'm sure if I went back to that same company, I will find that there are more girls who are doing electrical, mechanical, and so forth and so on. So it is supportive environment is very, very important, but that support can also be institutionalized, where we have got institutions that you put in their policies and say this has to be done. And if you go against it, then you get reprimanded for really violating the institutional as well as country. In Kenya, I like to give this example again that we have got in our constitution, we say that there should be no more than 2/3 of any gender in one particular career. It could be in parliament, number of women MPs in parliament. It could be vice chancellors, women vice chancellors versus men vice chancellors. But nobody's bothered, yet it is in our constitution. We're not implementing this, so we have to be serious. Whatever we put on paper, a policy in paper has to be implemented and mechanism has to be there. So this is where we have got problems. So we have got policies, nice looking policies, but implementation is where the problem is.
Yeah. Now supported. We need to pick that up.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Prof, in terms of us now in the era of the fourth industrial revolution and technology enhancement of deliverables, in particular artificial intelligence and the growth thereof, how can we support and stimulate the empowerment of women in STEMI?
Right. As we say that, and thanks again for that question, as when we look at, in fact, it is being emphasized everywhere now, both at the UN level, as I talk about in May when we go to New York, we'll be looking at women and artificial intelligence to see exactly how far have we gone and what are the mechanisms that and policies to, and also implement roadmaps so that we can be able to actualize whatever we put on our policies. What can we do to ensure that? So let's have programs, and I give another example that we have here in Kenya when we work very closely with the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO. They partner with companies, technology companies, tech companies that come whenever we go to these different schools. They set up exhibition, and girls are free to go and play with programming. You find high school girls are busy on the computers. They are taught how to program and all that. Programming and robotic technology seems to now be encouraged a lot in schools. And I think we just have to make these efforts and ensure that we ensure that in every school, whether it is boys' school or girls' school, we have got equipped laboratories. Again, this is government has to make this decision and say, if United Nations, if we are supporting United Nations development goals, and one of the targets is to make sure that digitalization and women, digital divide is removed, then that means that we have to put mechanism in place, and we invest in money in laboratories and teachers and people are training on these particular fields. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. No, supported.
Yeah.
Let me go for a last question. Prof, in terms of this sustainable development goals, you mentioned clearly goal number 5.
Yes.
Your thoughts on disability inequality?
Disability and inequality.
Yeah.
We have to recognize, and I think quite a number of institutions now, they do have mechanisms and strategies as well as policies that have been put in place to enable, people living with disabilities are given special conditions and special facilities for them to be able, because we are simply saying that I am not able to compete. The ground is not level, and we need to have even playing ground for all of us. But if I've got a challenge, then you need to boost and provide me with a mechanism so that I can compete equally with the next person who is physically able and whatever ability that they have. So putting mechanisms in place to ensure that there's inequalities. This is all, again, it all depends on the country. Because if a country at the parliament level, at the government level, executive level, we now cascade it down to institutions, and we have got policies in those institutions. And we are simply saying that if a Department of Chemistry, we are not recognizing this, we need to be having either in terms of physical infrastructure, whatever different types of infrastructure, facilities that can enable women and people living with disabilities so that they can be able to cope. So when this mechanism and they are reinforced such that the policy is a standing policy, but the reinforcement is there. In terms of performance management, at the end of every term or whatever it is, a semester, we need to be able to show that this is what we have been able to achieve in terms of the set goals. So we have got targets and say that how much have we achieved percentage. It has to be, incorporated, integrated as part of our performance appraisals at different levels, whether it is in university, research institutions, whatever, government departments and all that. And as we do that, and we know that we are going to have performance management, obviously, my appraisal, I don't want to get low marks or lower scores because I did not adhere with inequality and, disability policies that have been stipulated in that particular institution. So I think it is a question of reinforcing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for your leadership and passion. Let me hand over back to Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Ngila and Professor Naidu. I'd like to now hand it over to Professor Himla Sujal, who's the Executive Officer of the Academy of Science of South Africa. Over to you, Himla.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Wow, Professor Ngila, that was really, really an amazing presentation. The depth that you provided with the statistics, etc., is just mind-boggling. And I just want to say that a few people on the chat have been asking if you would be willing to share your presentation. Although we have a recording, I think because of the pace at which the presentation goes, you provided some amazing statistics that many of us in academia would like to go to the one-stop position to acquire that knowledge if you are willing. I see you nodding your head. So if you could please provide that to Raj and so she could share it. Entrenched in some of the statistics that you have presented us, both globally and in Africa with respect to representativity of women, when you talk about 33.3% of academics globally being women and 33.5% being from Africa, that's really quite interesting. Because even if you look at the number of women in the various academies around the world, not many go above 30%. So that is really very interesting that we have this caucus of women in various disciplines of academia, and not just on the continent, but globally. And even if you look at the statistics for African academies, we are well below that par. So that is something very, very interesting. And while you were talking, and everybody must forgive me that I can't remember the exact figures. Last year or the year before, we were at a Women's Day function in Sandton, and Dr. Vijay Reddy from the HSRC was speaking, and she was talking about the similar topic on statistics and the placement of women from science. And like you, where you mentioned the high proportion of female graduates and undergraduates from Africa being around 47%. So did she present that, and it was quite amazing. In some instances, among the sciences, there were more women at undergraduate and postgraduate level than men in many of these disciplines. And I think that the variant there was in engineering, where men outnumbered women, and probably mathematics. But what was more staggering from her presentation was that when she gave the statistics of women in senior roles in academia and in the labor workspace environment, then the number of women in those high places dropped significantly. So therein lies what you've been talking about. Two points I want to extract out of your presentation that I really, really liked. One was your mention of a supportive culture. I think you hit the nail on the head that when we're talking about how women would advance within the society, you need that support structure. You know, women are seen as superwomen in terms of the varied activities that they participate in, from the role they play in the home to the workspace to, you know, national, regional, and internationally. The role divide is very much weighted towards women having a more significant role to play in that homestead. And so we need to change that culture. And again, I want to cite Dr. Romila Maraj, who used to be at the NRF. I'm not sure if she's still there, but what stands out for me from presentations that she's given was always this: you don't change women. Women don't need to be fixed. You got to fix the mindset of the society. And in this respect, we need to change the mindset, not just of women, but also of men. And where do we start this in this cascade? The second point that stood out for me is your mention about, for example, the Kenyan example of where you have policies of the numbers of women that you require in particular positions. We do have that in South Africa too. But the point of interest is, how do we go from policy to the implementation? And I think that is where, you know, we have, you know, the stop codons in this entire thinking process. And the third thing you mentioned too was opportunities. And these opportunities are varied. And I like the examples you gave of promotion of women by way of you know, prizes and awards and recognitions, etc. But these must be done without that idea of tokenism. You know, in all my years, even though I've been in science, I refuse point blank to be nominated for any Woman in Science award, because I want to be gauged as an academic who's compared to all. But that's my personal choice. But I like what you say, that it gives those opportunities of mentorship, etc., role models, and promoting, you know, the upcoming students, and particularly that of women. Professor Ngila, your work at the foundation is absolutely remarkable. And the fact that you stand up to be counted as one of the 10 in advising the United Nations, and standing up, taking your collective experience and resources into the room where you have a voice, that is really, really remarkable. And I want to congratulate you in the way that you stand, not just for women in science, but for the representativity of the youth, and bringing science into the dialogue of the way in which we live our lives. Chairperson, one of the things missing in Prof. Ngila's short bio is the fact that she also serves on the ASSAf South African Journal of Science Advisory Board. And we also value your time that you engage, and the wisdom that you bring in that voice that you have on the advisory board for the Academy. Colleagues, if we were to take the lessons out of Prof. Ngila's presentation today, I think you will join me in saying that she has raised many, many issues to us. But from a personal perspective, I just want to add also that the choices of culture and all of the things that we've heard about, challenges, etc., actually start in the home. And women play a significant role of how we champion the divide of the way in which we raise our girl child and the boy child. Prof. Ngila mentioned during her presentation, if you had money and you wanted to educate a child, who would you back for that? And in most cases, it will be the boy child. We need to change this. We need to change the roles, like I was raised growing up with, of, you know, these roles are for girls and these roles are for boys. And if we as women in the workplace want that equivalence in the workplace and internationally, we ourselves got to change that mindset in the home, because that's very, very important for us to go forward. Colleagues, I don't know, Prof. Ngila has raised so many voices in our heads. So for everybody participating in this inaugural STEMI lecture, and one of the people on the chat also asked about STEMI or STEAM. And I think, Raj, we need to reintroduce the arts in the STEMI, because it is through arts and the bringing in of that confluence of artistic thinking, the way in which our brains are rigged, to look not just at empiric information, but at creativity. I think then we stand a chance of closing the gaps even further, as was raised to us from Prof. Ngila. Colleagues, all I want to say in closing is this has been the most inspirational talk I've heard in a long time. Thank you, Professor Ngila, for sharing your collective wisdom with us, bringing into the presentation not just statistics, but also recommendations, and to Pat Naidu for asking you those challenging questions, which you've answered with a lot of thought, even though you were so-called standing on your feet in the response. So with that, I want to say a very, very big thank you to you and everybody on the committee for these arrangements. But I know that the chair has a special person to do the vote of thanks. So for me, thank you once again, Professor Ngila, and I hope that our paths cross in person soon, because I think we'll have a lot to share and exchange in notes. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you so much, Professor Sujal, for encapsulating that so well. Yourself, of course, another trailblazing scientist from the continent. So my job now is to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Professor Ngila once again. I'd like to thank you for this very solid grounding for future critical discussions in STEMI from the Academy of Sciences South Africa. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Professor Majosi, Professor Naidu, Professor Sujal again, and Dr. Twala for availing themselves this afternoon. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the organizers of today's event, Rajeshri Maharaj, and the staff behind the scenes, Henriette Wagner, Jazama Kwebani, Renata Vanier, Letaba Kumalo, and Ina Smith. So that brings us to the end of the program. Thank you all for your attendance and contributions today, and best wishes from everybody at ASSAf. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you.